Okay, let's friend, in my earlier video I had told you about the bar graph in which different items were there. For example, different countries were there. Like this was the bar graph which was having 7 different countries, and there were the data was about the number of Indian students going abroad to different countries, right? So but sometimes what is there on what is called y-axis, there are number of years in case of bar graph. Let's discuss how to interpret data in that particular case where there on the y-axis there are number of years. So this is the graph where you can see that here we have taken the number of Indian students going particularly to one country. We have taken, that is Australia, in thousands, right? And the years we have taken from 1990 to 2025. So this is an interval of approximately 5 years in between, that is 1995 2000, and you can see now there is a bit of future data also. I will let you know how to explain that also in case of bar graph, right? So before explaining, let me tell you, in case of a bar graph, when there are years on the what is called y-axis, then there's what we can do is that we can join the middle lines. If we can join these middle portions of the bar graph, and we can convert it into a sort of line graph just at the middle point, right? And then let's say it will go like this, joining this, then it is almost this, then finally this and this. This is how we can join the middle portions of the bar graph, and then finally we get the line graph. Here means mostly the vocab of which will be used, that will be of the vocab which we used in the line graph. For example, in 1990, because let's say in 1990 the data was approximately 48,000 students prefer to go to Australia in the year 1990, and after that, if we say from this till this, there is a continuous growth, and we can call it a gradual growth. That is, in between 1990 to 2000 there was a steady, gradual or slow growth or slow incline in case of the number of students preferring to go to Australia. And after, you can say, 2000, there is a significant incline. That is, it has jumped from approximately 65,000 to that was almost it is 65,000 to approximately what is called 105,000, right? So this means there is a jump of around 40,000 students in this particular section. So definitely we will say a noticeable or market jump, or a market increase or incline or growth. Or you can say that after 2000 the number of students going to Australia swelled by 40,000 within the next 5 years. And of course in the next next 5 years, 5 to, that is 2005 to 2010, it's quite visible that there is a market decline or noticeable decline, that you can interpret these 5 years as like after 2000 what is called 5, the number of students going to Australia declined markedly. And of course you can explain this point as the maximum level, as we can say, of students. So you can say in the year 2005 maximum Australia attained maximum number of Indian students for higher education, or you can say maximum number of students or highest number of student basically liked to go to Australia in the year 2005. And after that, yes, of course, there was a significant decline, and for next 5 years it remained almost or precisely constant, or it precisely stagnated. You can use the data also. It precisely stagnated at around 55,000 of the students, right? And after 2015, yes, now since it is going to enter into future data, so you can use the words basically which we use in case of future data, like expected, anticipated, forecasted. Yes, the word, or another word you can use is projected, right? So So these are the words for future data which we can use in this particular case, like the period especially from this 15 to 25, in between let's say 70. So what we can explain is that after 2017 17, because this is current is 17, so after 2017 the what is called the interest of Indian students in Australia is expected to fall drastically, right? So and thereafter, or moving further after 2020, the situation is going to be reversed. The number of students projected to go to Australia increase manifold, that is from approximately, you can say, 12,000 to approximately 73 or 75,000. That is, there is a jump of approximately 63 to 64,000 of the students. So this is how you can explain the bar graph, where there are years on the y-axis or on the base basically. So in case of that particular bar graph, you can convert the bar graph into line graph by joining the middle line, middle points. Let's say these are the middle points, by joining the middle points of the bar graph, and in that case you will get a sort of trend, and it would be very easy for you to explain the bar graph. And the words which we can use are again the same which we used in line graph: steady, gradual, slow, for a slow kind of a growth, and if it is a significant or rapid growth as it is happening over here, then word which we can use is that significant incline, or we can say steep or sharp or noticeable or exponential growth within this particular period, right? And similarly, if we can say let's say for example it is the same, for these we can use the words like stagnant, we can use the word constant, we can use the word same, we can use the word equal or similar. That is, we can say that the equal number of students prefer to go to Australia, or equal number of students landed up in Australia in between 2010 to 2015, right? So let me explain you how to open the graph, how to start writing the body, and how to basically add up trends if they are there in the graph. Then let's start with opening of the paragraph, right? That in this particular case, definitely you will be, as I have already told you in my earlier videos also, that you will be given a statement and you are supposed to rephrase the statement, right? Let's say you are given an X statement, but we are taking an example. In case of rephrasing the statement, and after rephrasing, during rephrasing the statement, if in the statement there is shows, you can replace it with reveals, tells, illustrates, demonstrates, depicts, provides information about the phrases you can use, provides information, gives information, right? Provides information, gives information, etc. I hope it is visible now. So we can open this graph by saying that the given graph provides us information about the number of Indian students going to Australia within the year 1990 to 2025, and the data is given in thousands or calibrated in thousands. This is how we open the graph. Then body, as in my earlier videos I have told you, there are two different methods. Although you can open the graph in n number of ways, or body in n number of ways, and in that particular case, but I have given you two ways, that is, it is evident or clear. You can use word from the graph, or you can start with the body to begin with. It can be seen that. So for example, here you can start that it is evident from the graph that from 1990 till 2000 there was a steady growth in the number of Indian students preferring Australia, right? And or to begin with, there was a steady growth, or there was a gradual growth in the number of Indian students preferring Australia till 2000, or for the first 1 decade. So 90 to 2000, there is 10 years, that means 1 decade, right? So then, since we move from one situation to another situation, I told you we can use the words thereafter, we can use the word after that, next, moving further, in case of considering, taking, or in case of, as I already told you, taking the case of. You can also use for how to use these words. Let me explain you how to use these words considering the graph. Here you can say, for example, what we can say is For example, now from this to this we have taken one situation or one change, and that we said there was a gradual growth within 1992 2000. Now after that there is a rapid incline, so then we will use the phrase after that or after 2000, the what is called the numbers grew rapidly, right? When we use second form, and we can use ly, right? So the number grew or increased or jumped rapidly to almost 105,000 within this particular period, that is within 5 years, right? Then in the next, then you can say in the next 5 years there was, then thereafter, then after that, now we are using next. In the next 5 years, the number of students observed a sharp decline, right, as far as their preference for Australia is considered. Then moving further, now we are using moving further, the figure remained same for the next 5 years, right? Considering the future data, that is considering future 5 years, then this is how you can use different words while using from one situation to another situation, right? So after that, let's start. We talked about how to open the graph, we talked about the body, we talked about the different words which we can use in the body or while explaining the body, right? And after that we talked about, of course, the future data also, which was in this particular period, what words we can or vocab we can use to explain the future data, right? And contrast, of course, contrast we will use in that particular case when there will be two countries going on, because the contrast is generally there where there is comparison between two different items. So for the words of contrast, of course, they are given over here, whereas while on the other hand, on the flip side, on the contrary, right? So those you can use here also. You can use in like, for example, in the first decade there was a steady increase, whereas, or on the other hand, the increase was significant in the next 5 decades. Or you can say in the first, after 2000 to 2005 there was a significant incline, whereas on the other hand, or on the contrary, there was a sharp decline or marked decline in the next 5 years, right? This is how we can use the words of contrast using different years also, right? It's not necessary that items should be different. Then of course you know about the conclusion, and in this and I have already generally told that conclusion, you in case of writing conclusion, try to write it crisp and try to strike or use the striking or the most visible change while writing the conclusion. And of course you can write down you can use the trends also. And if you are not having the idea about trends, let me explain you what I mean by trends in this particular case. So here you can say, for example, let's say I show you the kind of trend. Here you see the data is increasing and increasing. So when the data is increasing like this, then we call it as a positive trend. And on the other hand, if you see that it is declining, so this sort of a trend is called a negative trend, right? Or we can call it a downward trend also. Sometimes we get a different sort of a trend, like for example here I am going to show you. Now if you got a graph like this, and here we have taken the sales of cars, on the other hand we have taken different months. Now in this particular case, if you join the middle points, you will get a sort of line graph like this. So here you can very well interpret that in this particular case the sales is increasing, declining, then there is a growth, then there is a fall, then there is again a sort of a swell, then the figures swelled, then there is again a sort of noticeable decline. So incline, decline, incline, decline. So this kind of you can say graph, we can say that the sales of the car showed a sort of erratic or fluctuating or zigzag trend. So I hope you might have understood what what are the trends, or how we can interpret trends in case of bar graph, which is having you can say time at the base or at the y-axis. Time can be in the shape of months, as over here it is Jan, Feb, March, etc., or it can be in the shape of years like 1990, 1995, 2000, etc., etc., right? Now this was the simplest form of graph, where there are number of years. Right, now we are going to talk about a complex sort of graph which you will generally get. You are not going to get this simpler graph. Let's, if you are fortunate enough, it's not you can say a fixed thing that you cannot get this kind of a graph. You can get, of course, this simpler graph also, but in that particular case generally it's a combination. This generally it's there are two graphs. In that case you will be getting a single line graph also, and a bar graph, of course, which would be there, or it can be a combination of a bar graph or a pie chart. I will discuss about that also in my future videos. Right, now let's talk about a sort of graph which is now given over here. Here what we have taken is that on one side we have taken number of Indian students going abroad, right, to 4 different countries. Now here we have taken UK, Australia, US, Australia, and that stands for New Zealand, of course Canada. Right, 4 different countries are there. And now see, so sometimes the student gets scared that how to explain this kind of data. So nothing to worry about that. The best part or the best thing to explain this sort of a data is in the first year, or in the first years, you do one thing. You simply compare the data of these 4 countries among themselves, right? And then later on you simply convert it into a sort of different countries into sort of line graph and explain. As I have already told you how to convert it. Just for example, in the very first year, in case of 1990, how we will say that in the year 1990 maximum number of Indian students preferred UK, and the figure was at 70,000 students. It was closely followed by UK was closely followed by New Zealand at around 66,000. Then after that you can say Canada was the 3rd most preferred country among the Indian students, Australia being the least preferred, or Australia being the least demanded country or least demanded destination among the Indian students for higher education. So initially in the very first years you have compared the data among these countries. Now you can take each country individually. For example, UK, now we know we can draw a line. UK is like this, then this is UK, then it is moving like this. Yeah, one thing I would like to say that if this sort of data is there, it's better to write down the name of the countries or some sort of a symbol, so that you don't commit mistakes or you don't you can say get confused while explaining the data. So UK, you can write down UK over here also, then it is to be met over here. Now if you are going to explain UK, now it would be now very easy for you to explain. After 1980 you can say, if we see in case of UK, there was UK observed a drastic fall in the Indians in the intake, a drastic fall in case of Indian students coming to UK for higher educations in the next decade. So after 1990 till 2000 there was a significant incline in the number of Indian students preferring UK as their destination for higher education. But the next 10 years, or the final decade which has been given to us, again there was a significant decline, or you can say a noticeable decline in the students going to United Kingdom. Right, so this is how you can interpret United Kingdom. In case of, let's say, now the second country is Canada. So Canada, if you see, it is moving like this, then again this, then it is like this. If we join, now in case of Canada, you can say that yes, there was a significant incline in the number of students, or in the number of students preferring to go to Canada within 2 decades, that is 1980 to 2000, right? And it jumped from approximately 55,000 to 110,000 within these 2 decades. It is I think double the figure. You can say that the figure got doubled within this period, or figure has doubled within these 2 decades. So and after that there was a minor decline. Then you can say that there was a decline of around 10,000 students in the next decade, right? So this is how you can explain Canada. Now let's talk about Australia. Australia is now, this is Australia. The third bar is Australia, this, and you join it like this, then it goes this, then it is like this. So in case of Australia, you can say that for the first decade, that is in between 1980 to 1990, Australia has seen, you can say, remarkable increase in the number of Indian students. And after 1990, of course, the incline continued, but it was at a sort of steady pace, right? So, and it attained it started from 40,000, but by the end of 2010, it reached at around 95,000, which was, you can say, more than double. The growth was more than double the number of students. Then now the last country we are going to talk about is New Zealand. New Zealand is like this, then if we say it almost constant, then again like this. So in case of New Zealand, you can say that New Zealand was at around 65,000 in the year 1980, and after 1980 it observed a downfall in the number of Indian students preference, and from 65 it came down to 50,000 students. There was a decline of 15,000 students within first decade, and the next, you can say that for the next decade it was precisely the same, or the number of students preferring New Zealand remained almost the same, or rather in fact they were precisely same or similar or equal within this decade. And after that, yes, New Zealand again saw a downfall, or sort of you can say a downward trend can be seen in case of New Zealand, and of course it's a sort of upward trend in case of Australia, a sort of fluctuating trend in case of UK, and in case of Canada, of course, it's a sort of, you can say, an upward trend. Of course, there is a decline in the last year. So I have almost given you the conclusion also for this particular graph, let's say, because while concluding, you can say that to sum up, it can be inferred from the graph that all the countries show different sort of trends during this particular period. The UK showed a sort of fluctuating trend as far as the interest of UK showed a sort of fluctuating trend, whereas Canada and Australia both showed positive trend, with the Canada falling in the end years, and what is called New Zealand showed a declining or downward trend within the given period. So this is how you can interpret this particular graph. So students, you need not to panic, just be cool and calm, and just try to interpret the data logically. And if you have the idea how to interpret the data, as I have told you, need not to panic. We are not supposed to tell the figure at each and every point. UK in 1980 UK was this, in 1990 UK was this, in 2000 UK was this. Yes, we can say figures are important, we have to quote figures, and sometimes, for example, you can say that it touched its highest point. What is there? This is the case of Canada. You can say within first 2 decades, or after 1990, there was an exponential growth in the number of students preferring or number of students demanding Canada, and the figure jumped from, or it touched its highest level, that is 110,000 in the year 2000. Alright, so these figures you can quote, and the minimum, for example, New Zealand touched its minimum in the last year, that is 2010, and that was around 35,000 of students. It declined from 65 to 35, almost it became half, so that the number of students which were going to Canada, or which went to Canada, of course, if it is the data of the past, so we can say that the number of students who preferred New Zealand, they became half within the 1, 2 and 3. Within the 3 decades, they were reduced to half. So there are n number of ways to write the statements. So yes, the only thing is that you should have a good vocab in your hand. You should know how to interpret, then there is no problem at all, right? So this is how to explain the graph where there are years at the base. I hope you might have understood this particular thing or this particular graph. Let's talk about now do's and don'ts again, although I had explained do's and don'ts in my last video also, right? So let's see if the students who haven't seen that last video, we are just going to quickly talk about the do's and don'ts in a task writing task 1 of the you can say IELTS exam. So the first is, I would just like to, instead of it's a suggestion sort of thing. If you really wish to improve your graphs, whether it is a bar graph or line graph or pie chart or table, I would recommend you to go and I would recommend you to read the business section of the leading newspapers, English newspapers, like the Tribune is there, the Hindustan Times is there. In India, I'm talking about Times of India is there, and the best is Economic Times. If you can go for Economic Times, because a lot of data graphs are there in the Economic Times, right? You will see that. So this, if you can say, will definitely improve your writing in the graph. And then next, which is, yes, don't repeat the words. That's why we have given a lot of vocabulary to you, so that you don't repeat the words. There is rapid, there is steep, there is sharp, there is noticeable. Don't repeat rapid again and again, right? Just change the word. And of course sentence also, you are not supposed to repeat the sentences again. Then don't focus much on figures, as if you start focusing on the figure, I think the graph will go to 400 words, but we cannot do that, because we have time limit also, and we are to take care of that also, right? As we are to write down task 2 also, and that too is very important, and in fact carries double the weightage from task 1. And then stress more on, like as I've told you, trends, and stress more on trends instead of, or changes, like change, significant decline, then exponential rise, then fell markedly. So changes, just tell, right? So now then rephrase the statement that I had told you earlier in the beginning only. You are definitely supposed to do that, otherwise those words won't be counted into it. Conclusion, yes, again it should be crisp, it should highlight the main noticeable points or changes, and yes, definitely use trends in the in writing the conclusion. It will definitely fetch you more bands. Your grammar and spellings must be very clear. Grammar, try to do as less mistakes as in grammar as is possible. So please don't do mistakes in grammars, right? So let's talk about spellings. Yes, spelling mistakes. If you do spelling mistakes, again your points will get deducted. So don't do spelling mistakes, right? And one thing, before writing conclusion, I am telling time and again in all my videos, you are supposed to do the word count before writing the conclusion, because if your words are too short, then you will have to erase the conclusion first. So best is first count the words, then write the conclusion. If the words are less, then add some words into the body and then write conclusion, because the conclusion can, in case of task 1, should be of 1 or at the most 2 lines, right? A lengthy conclusion is not it doesn't look nice, right? And yes, of course, you try to write the graph within 20 minutes, and it would be really better if you can write it down in 16 or 17 minutes, and you get a chance of 2 minutes, at least 2 minutes or maximum 2 or 3 minutes to revise it, so that you can basically rectify the mistakes which you have committed by chance while writing the graph, right? So this is what all about the you can say bar graph, having time on one side and data on the other side, right? So I hope you might have understood about this particular thing. If you have any queries on the YouTube, I have given my email ID, I have given even the address. If you are basically from Amritsar, you can visit our office. This is Sandeep Mahajan. You can call me also. My number is 978009672. And thank you very much for watching the video, and I wish you all the best in your exam, and I request you to please send this video or share this video with your friends also who are preparing for the exam or who are going to give the exam in future, so that they can also score well in the exam. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and please do subscribe the video so that you can watch the videos which we are going to release in the future also. And if you can leave your comments, that will be an added motivation sort of thing for me. Thank you.